So hi everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Jeff Christie. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Boast.ai. As I was kind of saying to Julie, I've been around since the beginning as their first employee, and we started as what I would call a traditional SR&ED consultancy, and we've evolved into a software company that helps digitize the process. It's not going to be fully digitized because someone's still got to write a tech report, and if you guys have gone into this, you'll know. But our whole goal with our software system is to reduce the time that people spend having to prepare claims and make it a proactive approach. So I won't pitch Boast too hard today. I kind of want to go over SR&ED. Just as you know, people on camera, just put your hand up if you actually claim for it now. Just so okay, and then put your hand up if you're kind of like, hey, I need to know more in case I want to claim. I'm guessing. Okay, cool. That gives me a good sense of the room, so I don't, spend too much time on one section here. This is going to be completely interactive, small group. So if you got questions while I'm going through it, just come off mute and ask me. As I was joking to Ilya, I can just talk forever. So if you got questions, please jump in the middle of it. So we'll start off a little bit first with kind of a real overview of SR&ED, and then we'll get into a little bit of the requirements, and I'll tell you a little bit about how Boast.ai makes that process. So it's not a 4-letter swear word, but it's maybe a 4-letter word you can say in front of your kids. So there we go. So really the Boast value proposition is increase your SR&ED claim with software. So it's a managed software product that we have that integrates mainly with your technical tracking systems such as Jira, GitHub, and some of your financial tracking systems. We don't integrate. We do it's on the roadmap, and we do the easy integration, which is called CSV export and upload. Either way, once the information gets into our system, we run AI and ML algorithms against it to try and classify SR&ED work and try and use as less of your time. As it says here, we also do SR&ED financing or SR&ED funding. So we'll advance your SR&ED claim on a quarterly basis. So one of the biggest differences that we do is this isn't an end-of-year exercise. It's a quarterly exercise throughout the year with your technical teams, so that we're gathering information in 45-minute meetings every quarter, so that it's something that's kind of ready to go at the end of the year. So there's the quick pitch. A little bit about us. We've been around since 2011. We started in Calgary. We expanded to Vancouver, then we expanded down to San Francisco and then out to Toronto. And we're currently in the process of opening up an office in Montreal. 3 years ago is when we started building our Boast.ai platform, which I'm happy to show you guys either here or in a separate call or meeting. Here's what we'll go over today: SR&ED qualification criteria, case study, CRA reviews, etc. For those that don't know, what is SR&ED? So it stands for Scientific Research Experimental Development. Key here is experimental development. Ignore scientific research. You actually claim on one of the two sides of the program, and only about 3 or 4% of claims go in under scientific research. Basically, if you're a company developing a product, you're going to claim under experimental development, and we'll get into what that means. Applicable industries, I think everyone here is in software, but it spans into manufacturing, agriculture, oil and gas tech, biotechnology, many more. As long as you're encountering technological challenges that there's uncertainties how to overcome, which again can be kind of confusing on how you define that, this is a program that you can access. The key thing for those that don't know about it, it's spend it to get it money, not get it and spend it. So most grants are what I call get it to spend it. You get the money, then you spend it. SR&ED, you spend the money, and then you recoup portions of it through your corporate tax return. Real quick, who can claim? So there's two categories in the SR&ED world. There's a Canadian-controlled private corporation, just what it sounds like. It's a Canadian corp, privately held from within Canada. And then there's non-CCPC. That's generally a Canadian corp that's either publicly traded and or foreignly owned and controlled. Why is that important? Because there's different return amounts that you're going to get for SR&ED. So you can claim back on salaries you've spent, subcontractors, and materials. And you can claim back, these are net numbers, these 64, 32, 42. Only net because there's lots of there's 3 calculations that go into it. So in a separate conversation, I'm happy to dive real deep on how we come up with those. For those of you in Alberta, these numbers are slightly lower right now. They're 54, 28, 38, because the provincial government cut the SR&ED program at the beginning of January 2020. But for most other provinces, these are the numbers, up or down 1%. The biggest difference is it's a federally administered program that each province piggybacks on. And sometimes in the way that they piggyback off of it, it reduces it a little bit. If you're a Canadian controlled private corporation, the best part of this is that it's a refundable ITC. So that's a lot of tax words, but really it means it's going to be a cash refund, not something that you have to use to offset taxes owing. Other thing I like to mention here is the salaries and subcontractors need to be Canadian based. So if you are subcontracting people that are outside of Canada's borders, we can't claim for them. Real quick on the non-CCPC, I don't think this really applies to anyone, but FYI, it really reduces the return rates if you are a public company or foreignly owned. And generally speaking, the return is non-refundable, so it's just tax credits. Depends on which province you're in. If you're in Ontario or Manitoba or Nova Scotia, the provincial portion is actually refundable. And before Alberta cut theirs, it was also refundable. Before we hit criteria on the technical work qualifying, any quick questions that people jump to mind on that first bit?
I have a quick one.
Yeah.
So considering that, Alberta, dropped theirs down, we have developers that work across Canada. Mm-hmm. So can you claim against other provincial programs or just where the company's based at?
Good question. The answer is if you file a provincial tax return because you have a place of business in that province, then you can claim the provincial amount for them. But if you don't file a provincial portion of your tax return in that province, then you miss out on the provincial amount.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Good question. Anyone else? No, all good. Okay, great. So qualification criteria, this is kind of the crux, and this is where, we start off with the easy stuff because it's pretty straightforward. Now the qualification criteria, and this is all about technical work. So I like to start off by saying within the context of SR&ED, most of you are going to think business case. So why do I need this feature? Why do I need this? How are we going to market it? How's it going to go to market? We needed to make it work. SR&ED's the opposite. It's all about technical work. So it has nothing to do with the business case that you're trying to go after, which is a little bit weird and very different compared to most grants. You have to meet 3 criteria, and you have to meet all of them in order to claim for SR&ED. The first is that you're going to encounter a technological uncertainty. The second is that to overcome that, you have to go through a systematic investigation. And the last is that you have to show that you achieved a technical advancement. Advancements in the world of tech, as probably all of you know, can also be failures. So if it didn't work, it is an advancement because you know where to go. So let me get into them a little bit more in depth. So technological uncertainty, the CRA calls these TUs, and it's a really in-depth dive. So there's 2 ways to look at it. One is, first of all, you're going to encounter a technological challenge. And I say that happens daily in the lives of engineers. They're like, yeah, I always come across challenges. The second is they're going to have to go across and try and solve that challenge. And generally, they're going to look in the public domain or go to standard practices within their industry. So let's say software development to say, how could I solve this problem? So that's kind of doing due diligence. What's out there? Can I solve this problem with publicly available knowledge? And then depending on where they get to on that answer, they're probably going to have to then say, okay, hey, I got, say, 70% of the way there, but this remaining 30, we can hypothesize and think, and we're really smart people, but until we build and test, we actually don't know if it's possible. And this is all in the context of your own company. So you're not competing against Google here. It's not like a patent where, hey, if Google has the patent, you can't go after it. Google might be doing this, but they're not sharing their open source library with you somehow to say, oh yeah, you're interested in that, here's how to go do it. So it's really within the context of the company. And this is the hardest place that most companies have to understand what is our technological uncertainty. The biggest differentiation that we do at Boast is all of our staff that you'll work with are software developers themselves. So they're going to come in and not ask you what's SR&ED eligible. They're going to come in and say, tell us what you did this last year or this last quarter, and then we'll pull out the information on what's this. So this is our job to be able to do this, not your job. Here's some examples of technological uncertainties. So meeting technical objectives, so grand areas that you can claim in: scalability, performance targets, accuracy targets. Hey, our platform works great with 5,000 concurrent users, but we know that when we go beyond our MVP or whatever it might be, that we're going to have to handle 1 million concurrent users. There are such standard ways to do that. There's also a lot of complexity in doing that. You can look at which of several alternatives will produce a desired result. So, hey, which algorithm will help us get to where we need to, and how do we design and optimize that? And then finally, if you're building out of the box solutions, so sometimes you're like, hey, look, we can get 80% of the way there if we just buy this, but we're going to then have to build on top of it. That process is also decently, or not decently, it would qualify for SRED. Yes, question.
Yeah, so my understanding is, like, as a technical objective, for example, we couldn't say, oh, we want to reduce the price that we have to charge our customers, because the government would be like, yeah, that's your problem. But if we could phrase it in terms of required efficiency or something, like, am I right that you don't want to spin it based on like reducing cost, for example, like in terms of the first?
So you might say, hey, our software, we need to reduce the cost, so therefore we need to reduce, let's say, the human interaction on the back end. Hey, it's a software, but there's a human that does this piece that classifies the data in the right way for us to do something on it. I'm just coming up with examples.
So just phrasing the efficiencies in other ways.
Exactly. So you can rephrase it, because what we would say is, let's dig down to what the actual technological challenge is with doing that. So we want to reduce price, therefore we want to reduce manual data entry. Therefore, what are the technical ways to do that? Are they standard? Are they not? And how do we have to go about developing it? And then there's the systematic investigation on the left, it has to be performed by someone qualified. We only bring this up because that doesn't mean they have a university degree or this. Someone, especially in software, someone's been working in the industry for 5, 6, 7 years. What they're really looking for is someone like me, who has a straight background in business, to not be working on complex coding challenges. They're looking for someone who actually has a bit of a leg up to do this. I apologize for the words, but these are the CRA words. They really say, what's your hypothesis? How did you experiment? What were conclusions you drew? Think about this. If you're using an agile development method, you're doing that every single sprint. You're saying, what are we trying to get done? What are we trying to get through? How are we going to build and test it? And what are we going to conclude to be able to start our next sprint? So, if you're working in that agile methodology, it works in really well into doing this. And if you're using a system like Jira or something else and actually story pointing, makes it even easier to produce time estimations with our system, because we can hook right into that and do some auto time derivations. Finally, technological advancement, you got to get this. This is really like, what did you gain at the end of the project? If the other two criteria are satisfied before, this is like just an exercise in writing something. It's not necessarily something that you have to say, hey, we filed a patent, or we did this, or we commercialized the technology. Nothing. They just want to know, what was this part, the conclusion to the experiment. Seeing that most people have filed for SRED, I'll go through this kind of quick. This is just trying to illustrate the impact it can have. So in this example, we're a software company based in BC in Vancouver. 7 developers, 1 front end, 6 back end, average salary of $75K per year. Probably a little low for Vancouver, but we'll run with it. And we'll say that through our interaction with them, we believe that an overarching 58% of their time is eligible for SRED. So typically front end development's not eligible. The social sciences are excluded from SRED. And most of the time, the CRA is looking at this type of work that falls within that category. We can have a huge offline debate about that, but that's the way they're currently interpreting it. So that's what we can do. We got an expenditure pool of 75,000 times 58% times 6 people. And then you're looking at 64% back on that pool. So it's going to generate $167,000 refundable tax credit for this case study in itself. So as most of you know, it's a very impactful program. I mean, right there in this scenario, that's almost 2 developers that you can hire the next year when it comes through. Any questions on criteria? What could qualify, what couldn't? All good?
I have a question, but kind of related to the first part of the presentation.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
So you mentioned that subcontracting could be eligible. So
Yes.
suppose that we went through a company, Jeffco, but
Yes.
you had developers in Europe,
Correct.
but I'm getting billed by you.
Yeah.
So
the short answer is not eligible. The long answer is also not eligible. So some people will say you can claim, which is true because in the legality of it, you're paying a Canadian company. From our experience, if the CRA reviews that, it'll get denied immediately. So they'll go look through and see where the work was done, and then they'll deny it. So we generally recommend not to claim it, as to not kind of put a flag on what you're submitting.
Got it. Thank you.
The way to answer that question the other way is you can still claim the work. So if the work they were doing was super innovative overseas, we can still include that in the technical narrative. We just can't include the costs associated with them. So we can use their work to strengthen the narrative, but we can't include their cost.
Yep, got
it. Now we go into technical documentation. So let me start out with documentation on SR&ED, because sometimes it can be contentious for different people and what they've done. So the root of the SR&ED tax law as written in our tax code, you do not need any technical documentation to submit for SR&ED. Keyword submit. Now for the CRA to enforce the program, they want to see justifications of what you were able to produce. So the reason we differentiate that is sometimes clients will say, I don't think I have good enough documentation to submit. And we're like, no, you don't need documentation to submit. We agree your documentation's weak, that if they go to a review, it's going to be hard to substantiate. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't submit the maximum that you're eligible for just because you can't defend it. And then from our perspective, we would say, and let us work with you on a quarterly basis going forward to make sure your documentation gets a little bit better. We're never going to come in and say, hey, let's blow it all up and implement a new system. We're tweakers of systems, not implementers of new systems. So generally you got something in there that can work. So technical documentation generally needs to be dated, documented at the time of the work, and show technical challenges or iterations. What I try and describe here is, if you're a software developer and you wake up tomorrow and you can't remember the last year, but you're still a smart developer, what type of notes would you like to have to show you what you did and how you did it so that you don't have to redo it all again? So we're talking like, if you're using, again, Jira, Git, we're talking like 3 or 4 sentences on like a 2-week project. So it's not something huge. It's just like, hey, this, I'll go real basic. Page load speed was 10 milliseconds. We needed to get it down to 1. We tried refactoring this way. We tried, loading the database this way, and we tried this. These 3 combinations worked. Done, right? So something that just kind of highlights what we've done and how we've done it. Time tracking, again, another flag where people are like, so the CRA's gold standard is that you have some sort of time tracking system. In reality, that's very rarely going to actually happen. So what we suggest is 2 things. One, you can either work into a technical tracking system that works really well with story points or a sprint-based type methodology. We can, AI system, derive time from that type of information. And we're not talking like hourly time tracking or anything. We're talking like quarter, half-day increments, can be filled out weekly, just something that shows. And if none of that's there, we have good methodical ways to create estimates that aren't just like 25%, 15%, 40%, right? It takes a little bit more time in the preparation process, but it's defensible if the CRA were to look at it. So real quick on turnaround times, people ask for this a lot. So you submit this with your corporate tax return. You have up until 18 months after your fiscal year end to file for the complete fiscal year. I highly don't recommend waiting this long, because when we come in and interview your technical team and ask them the details of what they did 2 years ago, they're generally not going to be overwhelmed with joy at our presence. So hence why we try and get on that proactive process. So the CRA says right now that they're going to process all claims within 60 days of filing. Processing to them means they're either going to approve it or they're going to put it into a review. If you're a non-CCPC, the CRA says that they reserve the right to audit your claim for up to 12 months after filing, even if they approve it. So even more reason to be a Canadian controlled corporation. So this always comes up, reviews. Everyone's worried, I don't want to go to a review. We look at it from the opposite way. Claim what you're entitled to with good supporting documentation, and it doesn't matter if you get reviewed or not. There's 4 types of reviews. The biggest is the technical and financial review. And the CRA says they submit the CRA says that they audit 25% of claims per year. So it's not a if I'm going to go to a review, it's a when. So, if you claim for 5 years, they're going to come calling. People will say, oh no, but the CRA's accepted my claim for the last 4 years. Unless it went to a desktop audit, they did not read it. It just went straight through their system. So some people will say, oh no, they've approved our claim for 4 years, we're good. And I'm like, possibly not. So you gotta be careful on that. Any questions on that before I give everyone a quick pitch on Boast? I don't want to see everyone drop off now, so I'm joking. So here's where we go. Our Boast, what we call it, our R&D tax hub. Really, we're looking to ingest data, interpret that data through ML, and then output what we need. Our whole point here behind this system is that we want to reduce the time that you guys spend on this and have you focus more on what you do in the company, not on how to frame SR&ED. So tell us the story about what you've done, and we'll frame the SR&ED for you. This is kind of the one platform to help you grow. So this is kind of trying to illustrate, we're going to check in every quarter for 45 minutes to an hour with your tech team. We're going to use the information that we've already ingested through the integrations we have to make that meeting as productive as possible. So that at the end of each quarter, we're going to be able to create some sort of estimate at where we're at. And the one place that I haven't talked about yet, we also have a SR&ED lending business, or SR&ED financing, where at the end of each quarter, you could choose to take a loan out based on the accrued SR&ED amount. So it's a way for companies to access quicker and try and extend their runway for a receivable that's coming in the future. This is kind of more about the SR&ED. This is the quarterly advance on the SR&ED funding side. Again, there's no personal guarantees. It's only guaranteed against the SR&ED claim itself. And it's a great way for companies to try and think of accessing and creating your SR&ED claim and creating it more of a quarterly draw or a SR&ED line of credit, if you want to think of it that way. This kind of describes itself. I'm not sure how everyone's preparing now, whether it's internally or with another consultant or what we call the Big Four group, so your possible accounting partners. But what Boast brings is that proactive approach. We're the only group that has software that works at the level that ours does, that helps you with automated time tracking, documentation, integrations. You can email into the system, you can upload into the system, and all of that work really reduces the time from what we believe is about 40 plus hours with our competitors to kind of the 5 to 10 hours for us. If you guys didn't know, some of the people on the East Coast or West Coast might know this brand called Traction. We developed it in conjunction with, oh my goodness, Ilya, Launch Academy out of Vancouver. There we go. 5 years ago. It's a 1,000-person conference that happens every year unless we're in a pandemic, and then it goes online. And we bring up speakers from the Silicon Valley to speak on topics about growth of companies. So it's our way to try and give back to the community. Makes a massive network for us so that we can help and support our clients kind of beyond just SR&ED and make a real strong ecosystem. So there we go. We've gotten to the end. Yeah, 25 minutes of SR&ED. You guys did well. Anyone want to questions or things that they have going on with their current claim that they want an insight to, or anything that while we're here, I'm happy to try and help.
I've got a couple. So if or when a review happens, how active is your team at that stage?
Very. So I call us your set it and forget it review guys. So the CRA will only let you know that a review is happening. You press forward to us, and then we do everything else. I liken it to a lawyer prepping you to go to court. Eventually, you're going to have to take the stand and tell the CRA what you did. But your lawyer is going to stick handle all the process and then tell you what to say and what not to say when you come to the stand. So we handle the whole thing, and we've always worked on a contingency basis. So there's no extra fee for our review support.
Okay. Do you have any sort of rules of thumb or in terms of how many or how big the claims are, in terms of how packaging the work up into claims?
Are you thinking about number of projects that you write within a claim, or
I'm just kind of curious, because so
Yeah.
the process we have right now, we take all of our projects, let's say we have 50 in a year,
Yeah.
And then we try and group them by technical narrative,
Yeah.
And we reduce that down to maybe 10
Yeah.
for like a 15-person team. Some end up being a lot larger. Some end up being maybe like 30 people months worth of time. Some maybe are 2 or 3.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's super relevant. I'm just curious if you.
No, it's actually very relevant. So it's a good question. So our view is that you generally want to write as few narratives as possible, because then you're able to include more supporting work around it. So there's a difference between SR&ED work we're claiming and then actual supporting work that went into doing that you don't actually mention in the claim, but you include in the time. And generally, when you separate out into multiple projects, you're not able to include as much supporting work in the way that it works. With that said, the CRA does prefer lots of projects, because then they can pick and choose which ones they audit and pull them out to take a look at them. So it's kind of like, to maximize a claim, you want fewer projects. Some people like to go with lots. So we just say we try and find the strongest technical narrative that we can write, and then claim in that way. So I don't know if I really answered that, but generally with a team of 15 and 10 projects, I would lean towards you could probably reduce that and make it a bit more efficient.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else on thoughts, or everyone's SR&ED claims are generally going okay? Stop screen sharing here. There we go. Yeah, so yeah, there's a little bit more, I guess, about us real quick, but there's 37 of us. We just raised a decently sized funding round, so we'll be growing quite significantly in the next little bit. So we'll be around for the near and distant future to try and make this just something that people work into their technical process seamlessly, and isn't something that they're putting in as a, oh shit, we got to do this. It's kind of just something that happens right along with your technical development. And generally what you would probably do is you're probably doing quarterly tech reviews anyways, to be like, what did we do? What are we going? Kind of works into that agile development methodology. Unless anyone's still going waterfall. Anyone? No? No big plans in year builds? Cool. Well, yeah, Ilya will send out some of the information. Did we record this? Yeah. Yeah, and anyone, just so you guys know, the way that we work is always contingency. So if you're interested in learning more, it's a collaborative process. It's not like, hey, you have to come to us. Here's all the rates. You walk me through your current process. We think we can do better. I'll tell you how. Sometimes I think you're doing a pretty good job, and I'll say, love to work with you, but you guys have a decent system at the moment.
One question here.
Yeah.
Any chance you can share these slides that were very intuitive?
You bet. Yeah, absolutely. I'll PDF them, or maybe we'll just post them to our website and then send out a link for you guys to access.
Perfect.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you.
If you guys have questions about the exact individual province you're in and return rates, just fire me an email, because they all differ slightly. But those numbers we have there are the kind of the generalities for everybody.
I was just curious, if we want to see how your platform functions, is that something we can get an overview of, like book time with you, or something is there a short demo we can see now? Like,
yeah, I mean, if I can easily screen share now and show you guys some of it, for those who are like, nope, you can drop off. But yeah, I can give you the initial stuff, and then yeah, like I said, we always start off with our what we call SR&ED scoping and demo. So we're just seeking to understand what you're doing, how you're doing it, and then show the product and how it can hopefully augment some of that. But perfect, it loaded. Great. Always like it when demos load, right? So everyone can see the screen, right? I got you guys at the top. This is just an example for a company that would say have been with us for multiple years. A quick dashboard that you can see exactly where your past claims have been at, where they are, whether they went through reviews, desktop reviews. All these numbers here are calculated automatically. So you'll kind of see stuff, total expenditures, provincial refund, federal refund. You have 3 offices across Canada that are filing in every way. This all automatically calculates it. The crux of where I think the most value comes from is in this data field. So data is obviously where we're importing everything that we need. So in this example, we've imported sources from Jira and GitHub. We've run kind of clustering and classification, so we can look at either the way that you would classify this work in through your stuff, or we can system generate that classification. And then based on everything that we see in here, we can then assign it to technical projects that we have here. So it's as simple as me saying, this is part of the dynamic integrations engine project, click it. It all shows up there. And then I can click on auto time derivation, and based on the info that we have there, we're able to start coming up with initial time estimates. And that's where we jump into here. So we've already set up everyone's information, but based on that auto time information, we come up with who spent what time on what projects. And then this is an interactive sheet that most of our clients will have access to. So you could be like, hey, you can see it evenly breaks down a bunch of it. But if you could say, hey, that's true, but Alex was actually not working for March because COVID was crazy, whatever it might be, you can zero it out and create little bits of changes here. I could show you the review, but internally we review this internally, so we can send it to peer review. And then we also, our clients review all of this as well. And then you also have your technical reports. So these are kind of important. You're going to want to access this and write it. So we do all of our writing. It is Google Doc based. When it comes to your turn to review, we click on the client review, goes off to you. You can write and comment in it as normal, and it's an iterative place for us to have the platform. And then finally, we got the place where we're going to ingest either salaries, invoices, which are going to be around contractors and or materials that you've spent. I didn't really go into materials because you're all software companies, but if you are building any sort of hardware, you can claim materials that are transformed or consumed. I always mess up on that, but things that aren't useful anymore. So this is just an example. You can see where they're on job title, state. SR&ED role is really important for the CRA. They have all these classifications. So, if someone's starting halfway through the year or started halfway and left, we can capture all of that information. And then that all rolls out into the filing summary and tax form summary. And the tax form summary is important because that's what we export to your accountant. So we can export it in a format that they can just easily within, hopefully, if they're any good, 10, 20 minutes, upload it all. The other thing I'll show you is that we use this as our internal practice management system as well. So, everything's tracked from an onboarding meeting to scheduling all the check-ins, creating time estimations so that we can actively monitor our whole team to make sure that your project stays on task. And it's not your job to be doing that. It's our job to make sure that we're proactively engaging with you. So we're kind of what you would call set it and forget it SR&ED. You assign SR&ED to us and we'll tell you when you need to think about it. So there's the real quick one. I could go deeper, but that's the real quick, here we go. Here's what it looks like.
Oh, thank you. That was helpful.
I've got a few more questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
You mentioned front-end dev typically isn't claimable. So our company is fairly front-end dev heavy. To us, that mostly means we're SaaS. We have a fairly complex JavaScript applications.
Okay.
And we do typically claim that a good chunk of that. Some things that are more UI heavy, we don't try and claim, but there is a lot of technical development and challenges there as well. Do you see any problems there, or have you not had much success with that?
No, so success in the way that you're talking about. So some people will write a whole SR&ED project about how they went through a massive iterative process to try and figure out the best way for me to interact with the platform. And so we stay away from those narratives. But you're right, a lot of the UI work is fundamental to bring the backend development to life, right? Some of it's tweaking and optimizing. So usually we don't claim it as part of a project, but we claim it as supporting work, because it does need to happen to bring everything to life, but it's not something that we directly talk about.
Okay. What would you say do you have like a typical % claim that you think you get in terms of
return amount, like, or
like % of time, like
so like
58% in one of your examples earlier, for example?
Yeah, there's not a typical, it depends on the company and what they're doing. So the one example would be, we have a company that is developing self-driving car technology. A fair amount of what they're doing is eligible. We have other companies that are, I'm going to call it digitizing the oil field, which is essentially paper PDFs into digital. Not crazy hard, but we can find some work there, and we're probably claiming closer to like 20-25% of their time. So I would say for any company that would be medium grade, you know, claiming 60% or more is generally a ballpark, but kind of really depends on the technology that they're building. Okay. And year by year, right? So, you know, we find in cycles, 3-4 years, a lot of build, then they might go into a year of product maintenance, maybe 2, and then they build again. So it can kind of ebb and flow depending on where you're at. I'm sure you guys have gone through some of those cycles yourselves.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, some years you're like, whoa, we did a lot. And some years you're like, did we do anything? It's like, yeah, no, we did. We were just, you know, redoing half the back end. That's all.
And how does your pricing work? Is it like % of the claim, or flat, or hourly? %
of claim. So there's 2 pricing models that we really try and stay away from. So if you guys have talked with other consultants, there's always a fee per project. I don't know if you guys have come across that. We try and stay away from that, because that incentivizes us to write more projects, not maximize your claim. And then the hourly thing we always stay away from. So it's always percentage based. It really depends on the size of your claim. So if you tell me you have a $100,000 claim, it's one side. If you tell me you have a $500,000 claim, the percentages scale down quickly. So we usually invoice on a fixed percentage on the first 100,000 that comes back, and then we scale from there drastically. If your claim's getting real big, if you guys have $500,000 claims, we generally put in capped fees as well, to say it's percentage based and we won't ever go above X amount per fiscal year, because, you know, as it escalates, just because you tripled your team doesn't mean our invoice should triple. So, you know, without saying exact percentages, that's generally where we land. So, you know, if you tell me you have a $250,000 claim, our effective rate's probably closer to like 11% or so when you put it all together.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So even though the process is quarterly, the claim happens at the end, right? Because in one quarter, a work may not look like, or a task may not look like it's shreddable on its own, but when you build out the clustering or the final kind of use case, we can claim there's supporting work around that area. Okay.
Yeah, so we're not submitting, we're kind of, the quarterly is just mainly, well, it's twofold.
Checkpoints.
Yeah, checkpoints to make sure. And we like to talk about documentation at that time. So again, say you're working with Jira and you're doing XYZ, we can say, hey, you know, create 2 new categories that look like this. We'll never ask you to track SR&ED eligible work, but we will, you know, make suggestions to make it easier for everyone. Yeah, because sometimes in a quarterly check-in, we can say, hey, that quarter, there wasn't really that much. Okay, cool. But I can see how that works setting up for the work in the next quarter, or maybe the quarter after, where the SR&ED eligible work will come to life. I mean, for you guys who have claimed SR&ED, I look at it as like a line straight across, and you kind of dip into SR&ED moments and out of it, depending on where you are in development. So you got to take that whole context into play.
Cool. I think those are all the questions. So yeah, Jeff, thank you so much for this presentation. It was pretty interactive and fun. I hope everyone else enjoyed.
Perfect.
yeah, I'll send over the recording of this call to everybody later today. And yeah, if you guys have any questions about Boast or of course about VanHack, we're here to help. I believe we work with everyone on yeah, almost everyone. Not Martin yet, but yeah. So thanks for the opportunity to help you guys hire. And yeah, have a great day, everyone.
Yeah, including us. Some of what you see will be always developed by some of the help that Ilya has brought us. So yeah, we're living that same life.
Thank you very much, team.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.